Would you like to be able to predict how many yards a quarterback will throw, or who will win the World Series next season, or maybe just what the weather will be tomorrow? Well, all these involve some knowledge and understanding of probability. And probability is the measure of a likeliness of an event occurring, and it is on a scale between 0 and 1. 0 is an impossible event, and 1 being a certain event. And then there's numbers in between, which would end up being ones closer to 0 would be something that's unlikely to occur. Halfway in the middle would be as likely as not, 50% chance, and then likely would be something that's closer to 1. So let's take a look at some of these concepts using these different words and figuring out, looking at this event here of rolling a die. Well, before we quite get to that, let's take a look at what these fractions would represent. How would I figure out whether it's a 1/4 of an event? Well, the probability can be written as just the capital letter P, and then typically you put the event inside. And so the event may be just rolling a 7. So the probability of rolling a 7 is what our first one is. And so before we get to exactly what that is, let's talk about the fraction form of probability. And so if we have the number of successes on top of the fraction, then the total number of outcomes would be on the bottom of the fraction. For instance, if we have a fair 6-sided die, what would the probability of rolling a 7 be? How many ways can we roll a 7 is what we're asking. Well, I know there's a 1 on a die, there's a 2, there's a 3, but on the back side of the die, there's a 4, 5, and 6. There is no 7, so there's no way of rolling a 7. So there, the number of successes would be 0 out of the total number of outcomes. Remember, there's a 1, there's a 2, there's a 3, there's a 4, there's a 5, and there's a 6 on the die. These are the possible outcomes here. And so there are 6 possible outcomes. Not this number 6, but they're counting 6. You have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different outcomes. So in order to roll a 7, we would say, well, the probability would be 0 out of 6, or just 0. And so this is an impossible event. Well, try to roll a 6. Well, the probability of rolling a 6, which would be P6, probability of this event, how many 6s do we have? Well, I count 1 6. There's 1 6 out of how many possibilities are there? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different possibilities. So 1/6. So this is close to 0. It's even closer than this 1/4 to 0, and so this would be an unlikely event. It probably won't happen. There's more chances of getting a different number other than 6. Well, try to roll an even number. How many even numbers are there? So we'd say the probability of an even number. Well, there are 1, 2, 3 even numbers. So that would be 3 out of how many total? Well, again, there's only 6 numbers that we have a possibility of. Reduce that fraction, we're left with 1/2, the same number we have here. So that's as likely as not. So it's a 50% chance of rolling an even number. Try to roll a number greater than 1. Greater than 1 would be like rolling a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. So there's 5 different outcomes. So probability of greater than 1. And so if it's greater than 1, well, we've got 5 different outcomes. And so we'd say 5 out of, and then there's 6 total, just like before. So since it's more likely that we're going to roll a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or 6 over just a 1, that means that we would have a likely event. Now, I'm not talking about specifically rolling a 3 or a 2 or a 4. I'm talking about any of these numbers, getting either a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, rather than just a 1. And so that probability is likely. We'll try rolling a number greater than or equal to 1. So what are the possibilities? List them. See, we could have some successes or numbers that would end up being greater than or equal to 1 would be either a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. And so it's all the numbers. So it's 6 out of 6, which is 1. So we call that a certain event. So we know it's going to happen. And that's what we end up having. So we have a probability in a range. And we'll take a look at some other examples of using coins, cards, and marbles in part 2. So check that one out.